Hi, I'm Mike Siri, Special Teams Coordinator for the Red Hawks of Montclair State University. Montclair State University ranks among the top 10 winningest programs in Division III football over the past 77 years. Under my tutelage, the special teams of Montclair State have risen to the top of the New Jersey Athletic Conference charts. I want to thank Coach's Choice for allowing me to present my philosophy and information on winning the field position battle each game. Today's presentation will concentrate on how to design an effective kickoff return to score. Creating opportunities to win deals with designing an effective kickoff return package. I will demonstrate how the Red Hawks attack opponents with their man blocking scheme, and we will talk about alignments, assignments, and some of the blocking techniques. Video clips and diagrams will clearly show our operation, including our total scheme and who each man blocks, and how we have utilized those principles to be an effective kickoff return team. Over the past 5 years, Montclair State has demonstrated they have one of the most dangerous return units in the New Jersey Athletic Conference. Let's take a look at the PowerPoint and begin our discussion on effective kickoff return. Our kickoff return team, also known as Showtime, has a couple of objectives. These objectives are important if you're going to be one of the best in the conference. First of all, the returners, and that includes all 11 of the players, need to field the ball. You need to work on fielding the ball as part of your drills. Number two is that a lot of times the kickoff returners do not allow for the players to set up their blocks and the timing of the blocks. We work hard on timing and setting up all blocks. The next thing is we put a mental approach to the kickoff return by scoring. We want each player to understand that it's not good enough if we don't put that ball in the end zone. And that's our attempt on each and every kickoff. If we don't do that, the ball needs to be returned at least to the 35-yard line. And probably the most important of all the things that I just said is we do not want to start the offensive drive with a penalty. So we're looking for no penalties. If you look at our success over the past 2 years and looking at this slide, statistically you'll notice that 70% of our kickoffs were past the 35-yard line in the past 2 years. We've also scored 3 touchdowns, as I mentioned before. In 2007, we were first in the New Jersey Athletic Conference, and over the past 5 years, we have ranked no less than second in kickoff returns. And again, over the past 2 years, we have only had 3 total penalties on kickoff return. The man blocking scheme that we utilize is perfect if you're going to look for something new and something different instead of just having the front line drop and go to a wedge blocking scheme. We think that it's easier to practice the fundamentals. The second thing is the nature of the one-on-one responsibilities for each and every player can be identified. We can show how players can improve. And of course, if a player is not improving or we need to improve him because we don't have anybody else to do the job, we can have congruent drills that are going to help them. The other thing is we like the nature that our returns go north and south before they go east and west. A couple of the kickoff return premises. One I have already mentioned. They need to field all balls. Especially the front line, you need to work on not having them leave too early, especially for a surprise kick. We always need to see the ball kicked. Everybody does. They need to know where the direction of the ball is going, how deep it's going to be. That all establishes good blocking position. The next thing is they need to block in front of a person and they need to be above the waist. We never want our players to try, even though the returner might have a defender on him, try to lunge and leave their feet in order to block. That's too much of a chance to have a penalty or just cause other problems, such as other players getting hurt in a pile where they really didn't need to do that. They need to be prepared to carry out their assignment. We do a few things at Montclair State that I think help us. We give each player an identification sheet on what their return responsibilities are. We also have the players come in twice a week and watch film and check in that they did watch the film. And then on our Friday meeting, we do ask them what their assignments are going to be and tell me a little bit about the person that's on the opponent's kickoff team. What do they do? What do they like to do? What's their favorite escape move? Do they stay in their lanes? And things of that nature. And of course, we work very hard with making our returners effective. They need to be slow to go in the beginning. They need to read the blocks, find the tunnel, and then burst into the open area. The first slide that I have is going to deal with the front line not leaving too soon, just to make a point about field all balls. This was a key game against the College of New Jersey, and we know that they were a surprise kick team. They always like to start the second half with a surprise kick. We alerted our players, and now you can watch the action of a surprise kick with the return and fielding of the ball. That saves the, obviously, field position, but it also saves an opportunity for the opponent to get great field position with the recovery of their ball. Let's watch it one more time. As you look, watch the players in the front line. Their eyes are on the kicker. They don't leave before the ball is kicked. And then, of course, you can see the player who actually makes the recovery, training his eyes on the ball immediately and using great skills to secure the football. There's also a couple kickoff do's and obviously don'ts, especially in the return game. First of all, you need to give a continuous effort. What do I mean by that? Well, if you get knocked down, you need to get back up and find somebody else. Number two, as I said, after the kick, you need to keep your eyes on the man. When you watch the tape, utilizing or demonstrating our techniques in our drills, you will notice that we make an emphasis on a baseball peak, just like a stealer would do between first and second, looking back at the catcher. They need to take one or two quick glimpses to keep their person in sight. The next thing is the front five people need to make contact fit blocks. Okay, we don't want them on an angle. We don't want them leaving their feet. We don't want them diving. Okay, and we have drills that constantly work on that. The next thing is the second line needs to be extremely tough. That's where they need to drive their feet and root people out. The next situation is the members of the kickoff return need to be aware of a fair catch. We have a few teams that do not want to kick the ball deep to us, and they would rather pop it up and have us start on the 30 or 35-yard line than put the ball in the hands of our returners. And of course, the front line as well as the second line always needs to be aware of a surprise, a muff kick where kickers miss the ball, and of course, wind conditions. These are all standard for our front line people, especially after a 15-yard penalty that maybe we occurred because of unsportsmanlike conduct. Now, definitely, they're not going to kick the ball deep. They're going to kick it somewhat short and, of course, not put the ball into our returners' hands. Next, we're going to take a look at our alignment. We are a 5-2-2-2 kickoff alignment. Our front line, and we just label them left tackle, left guard, all the way over to center, right guard, and right tackle. And that front line, as you notice on the slide, is mostly DBs and outside linebackers, people who can run. Size is not a factor here. Speed is. But when you actually set up this, you want your smaller, faster guys towards the outside, and your bigger guys are closer to the center. Obviously, the center would probably be a more linebacker type or a big, strong safety. The toughest position to play in the front five is the center position because they do not have much room in their angle blocking, or as you call them, fish hooks, in order to maneuver. And that man that is coming down on coverage is going to be on top of them quite quickly. The second line, as we call it, is actually staggered. The left wing and the right wing are going to be up about 5 yards from the right fullback and the left fullback. Obviously, by looking at their positions, the fullback people are usually fullbacks, and yet the wings can be tight ends or actually big wide receivers that we use quite often. Their job is to set the back wall. Even though we're not a wall return team, as you're going to see, we're going to cluster into a wall, give that return a protection, and then we're going to break out from there and go to our blocking schemes. So these gentlemen not only have the ability to block and are tough people, but they have to have the ability to run across the field and make double team blocks or read the blocks. Our two return men deep are obviously very specialized in what they do. They must be able to communicate with each other about who's going to catch the ball, who's not going to catch it, who's going to be the lead blocker, and should the ball get close to the goal line and it looks like it's going to go in, should they down it or they can run it out, depending upon how fast the coverage is. The next situation is they need to be coached to go north and south. Most returners want to catch the ball and go left or right, and they think there's plenty of room out to the outside, but they find out real quickly how the defenders can close in on them and cause them some problems, and we're always afraid of losing the football. So north and south is how we start all returns, and then we will move towards an alley, and you'll see that on the video once we get rolling. If you talk about our alignments, if you're a college football coach, you need to keep in mind that we are starting on the 30-yard line. If you're a high school football coach, you need to alter these alignments accordingly. Our center will be the deepest of the front line people. So we're going to be slightly bowed. The center will be on the 43-yard line, whereas the guards will be on the 42-yard line, and the tackles will be on the 41. That center needs to be aware that they might have to come up and handle a surprise kick. Later on, we'll talk about that the center also makes the call so that everybody understands which man they need to block. Our ends, depending upon the kicker that we're facing, will align themselves between the 40 and 35-yard line, and their inside foot is 6 yards outside the hash mark. Again, if it's a directional kicking team and they're going to kick from the hash, then we will adjust that by 3 yards to the right or to the left. Our backs are between the 35 and 30-yard line, and their inside foot is on the inside of the hash. How do we actually start our kickoff return unit? We take a look at the huddle procedure. We keep the entire huddle on the sidelines surrounding two people, our head coach and our box coach. Our head coach likes to give a few words of wisdom because he is part of the offense, and of course he wants the best field position for his offense. Then the box coach steps in. They call the return. Sometimes we double recall it depending upon where the hash is, and we might have to change that, and I'll show you our schemes in which we do that. And then we remind them of be aware of the surprise, be aware of the pooch kick, and again, let's block above the waist. We go ready, break, and we use, instead of break, we use the word score. The next situation is once the team actually gets out on the field, they're going to stay slightly bunched for a period of time. They're not spread out in their normal position. What they are doing is they are looking for the call from the center. And in this particular diagram that you're looking at, the ball is being kicked from the middle. So this is a balanced return. He will say balanced, and then he will say 5, kicker 5. Pretty much our players know if it's balanced or unbalanced what the number count is. So after earlier in the year, we probably will drop the number count. Balanced, and the ball is in the middle of the field. So when we look at the numbering, the furthest guy to the outside is L5, and the furthest guy to the inside on the left-hand side of the field is L1. We will repeat that procedure from the right side in. We do not number 1 all the way to number 10 across the field. The reason why we do that is this is very similar to the way we do kickoff coverage, and we want to keep our terminology as close to the same as possible. When you take a look at this chart, and we're not going to look at it in depth, you notice the different configurations that you can have for a balanced and an unbalanced front. As I just mentioned, our balanced front was 5, kicker 5. But if you move to an unbalanced front and the ball is on the left hash, then you're probably going to see a 4, kicker 6 operation. Even though the one player is to the wide side of the field, and he would be L1, he's still considered a short side player in our numbering attack. When we use our man scheme, it doesn't matter if they are in a 4 kicker 6 or they're in a 5 kicker 5. What matters is that they're able to count from the right in and lower the number, and of course from the left in, and the lowest number is inside. Then they can find their man and be able to make the proper block accordingly. What I also do for our players, and this is something that you should consider, especially if you're a man protection scheme like we are, and also like to use multiple returns. I have taken this Excel sheet. You notice on the left-hand side is the name of the return, and on the top, working their way down, is the actual assignment, my number of who they're going to block. This also helps, and we carry this on the sidelines in case one of our front or second line players goes down, and we need to put in a player who may be not accustomed to knowing what the scheme is, the number who they block, but they have practiced the techniques over and over again. Let's take a look at our first return. Our first return is a middle return, and we call it Mr. Nothing fancy, but at the M signifies that we're going to go towards the middle of the blockers. What happens in the Mr. return is we can have a Mr. return on the right hash, on the left hash. We will always set ourselves where the ball is kicked to. Now, the front line players are going to take their fish hooks. The second line players are also going to fish hook and form a wall in front of the returners. That wall should be no more than 12 to 15 yards in front of the returner. It shouldn't be that deep also. Those returners need to get behind the wall, and what we want to do is entice people to come towards the middle of us to help set up the blocks. If you notice from the diagram, your right tackle is going to block number 3 to the right side. Looking at the right guard is going to block number 2. When you look at the right or the center, and by the way, the center will never align himself directly over the ball, because we do have some kickers who like to kick at the center, test his hands, and bounce it off of him in case the opponent wants to get a recovery in that way. And some of the kickers that I have seen, including I had one 3 years ago, who can actually put a hole in your chest. That's how hard he can kick it. Now on the backside, we continue with the progression of the left guard blocking L1, but because of the blocking angle of the right tackle, you notice he does not block L2. He will now block L3. You might say then, are you going to let L2 go in freely? No. that is going to be the responsibility of line 2. If you look at line 2, a team always has a contained player, and a team always has somebody bearing down the alley to try to bust up the return. The job of the right wing on the mister is to block R45. Only one of them will he block. He will block the guy most dangerous to the alley on out. If you look at the left wing, he has the same responsibility on the backside. When you now take a look at the two inside linebackers or running backs, they're usually fullbacks for us, you notice one is going to handle L2, and one of the keys is once they form their wedge and they sit in that wedge for a short period of time, once the returner gets about 5 yards behind them, and the return is moving at a quickened pace, but he's not in full speed, they will now break out, go to their blocks, stun their opponent, and then they will go ahead and form a tunnel, which should be directly where the returner has caught the ball. We have two lead blockers in this return. The first one is the right fullback or linebacker who's ever playing there in the second line, and you notice he's labeled MDM, most dangerous player. He has to have the keen ability to find who's the most dangerous or immediate to that returner and block him any way he wants to go. The other lead blocker, obviously, is the off returner who has not caught the ball and has been directing the activity of catching the ball and making sure that the ball is secure. Keep in mind that returner will take a peek back, especially if the ball looks like it's wobbly or drifting, to make sure that the main returner has secured the ball and that we do not have the ball laying on the ground in case of a muff. Let's take a look on videotape of Mister. You can see the second line closing in and forming a wall. And you can see the tunnel that has started. Now, one of the things that kill returns is guys that allow the defender to slip off of them. In fact, we would have liked to get the second line wall a little bit tighter, but you can see, and we're going to play this one more time, I want you to concentrate on the right side of the film. We actually have a guy blocked, and what happens is he goes down, even though the blocker went down, okay, he gets up faster, the cover guy gets up faster, and he scoots off laterally and slows down the returner so that somebody can catch him. But you have the general idea of the Mr. Return, who they're blocking, and how we're trying to create that tunnel. Let's take a look at another one.